Have you ever wondered why so many peace agreements in Africa, signed with hope and international fanfare, end up collapsing back into conflict? It's a question that weighs heavily on the continent, where the cycle of war and fragile peace has shaped the lives of millions. Understanding why these deals fail isn't just an academic exercise, it's crucial for building a future of lasting stability. So today, let's dive deep into the complex reasons behind the rise and fall of peace in Africa. One of the biggest hurdles is internal division. Picture this: warring factions come to the negotiating table, but are they all truly committed to peace? Often, the answer is no. Leaders might sign a deal for public relations or to buy time, while secretly planning their next move. Factionalism is a huge problem. A rebel group might not be one solid unit. It could be a loose collection of commanders, each with their own agenda. If one of them feels left out of the power-sharing deal, they have every incentive to break the ceasefire and restart the fighting. Power struggles are at the heart of this. Peace isn't just about ending the violence, it's about deciding who gets to rule next. If the agreement doesn't fairly distribute power, or if one side feels cheated, the foundation for peace is incredibly shaky. It creates a situation where the deal is just a pause in the conflict, not an end to it. But the problems aren't always internal. External interference plays a massive, and often destructive, role. Neighboring countries might support one side of a conflict to advance their own geopolitical interests, providing weapons, funding, or a safe haven for fighters. This makes it nearly impossible for a peace deal to hold, because one of the parties is constantly being rearmed and encouraged to fight. Then you have the big global powers. Their involvement can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, international pressure can bring warring parties to the table. But on the other, their support can be inconsistent. A new government or a shift in foreign policy can mean that the international community, which was once a guarantor of the peace deal, suddenly loses interest. This leaves the fragile peace process without the diplomatic and financial support it needs to survive. It's a story we've seen time and again. When global priorities shift, African conflicts can fall off the radar, with devastating consequences. Let's talk about something that fuels so many of these conflicts: the fight for natural resources. Africa is rich in diamonds, oil, gold, and other valuable minerals. But this wealth is often a curse. The competition to control these resources can be the direct cause of a war, and it can just as easily sabotage a peace agreement. Rebel groups often fund their operations by selling conflict minerals. If a peace deal threatens their access to this income, they have a very strong reason to reject it and keep fighting. Even after an agreement is signed, the question of how to share the revenue from these resources can be a major sticking point. If the central government is seen as hoarding the wealth and not distributing it fairly to the regions where the resources are extracted, it creates massive resentment and can easily lead to a renewal of violence. The promise of wealth becomes a driver of war, not a tool for development. Even with the best intentions, peace is hard to build on a foundation of weak institutions. Imagine signing a peace deal that promises police reform, and a national army, and an independent judiciary. These are great ideas on paper, but what if the government is too weak, corrupt, or broke to actually implement them? This is a common reality. Fragile governance means there's no state capacity to enforce the terms of the agreement. Disarming fighters is a key part of any peace process, but if the government can't provide security, people will be afraid to give up their weapons. Corruption is another cancer. If the funds meant for reconstruction, development, and reintegrating former soldiers are stolen by corrupt officials, it completely destroys public trust. People who have suffered through war see the elite getting rich while they get nothing, and the anger builds until the conflict erupts once more. Without strong, accountable institutions, a peace agreement is just an empty promise. Underlying all of this is the grim reality of economic disparity. You can't expect peace to last in a country where vast numbers of people live in extreme poverty, with no jobs and no hope for a better future. For many young men, joining an armed group isn't an ideological choice, it's an economic one. It's a job. It provides a salary, a status, and a sense of purpose that a failing economy cannot. A peace deal might end the fighting, but if it doesn't create real economic opportunities, what are all these demobilized soldiers supposed to do? Without jobs, education, and development, the same conditions that started the war in the first place are still there. Inequality is a huge part of this. If people feel that their ethnic group or region is being systematically excluded from the country's economic life, they will feel marginalized and aggrieved. This sense of injustice is fertile ground for conflict entrepreneurs who want to mobilize people to fight. Sustainable peace requires sustainable development. You can't have one without the other. History gives us some powerful, and often tragic, case studies. Look at the Bices Accords in Angola in 1991. It was supposed to end a long and brutal civil war, leading to elections. But when one side lost the election, they rejected the results and plunged the country back into a decade of even more intense fighting. The lesson? A winner-takes-all approach is dangerous. Peace needs to be about inclusion, not just a contest for total power. Then there's the Arusha Accords in Rwanda in 1993. This was a complex power-sharing agreement designed to end the civil war and create a transitional government. But extremist factions who were opposed to sharing power sabotaged it, and their hate-filled propaganda helped pave the way for the horrific genocide in 1994. The lesson here is chilling. You cannot make peace with those who are fundamentally committed to violence and exclusion. Sometimes, the will for peace is simply not shared by everyone at the table. And of course, we have to talk about Sudan. The Comprehensive Peace Agreement of 2005 ended the long war between the North and the South, and it famously led to the independence of South Sudan in 2011. This was hailed as a huge success. But look what happened next. South Sudan itself collapsed into a devastating civil war just 2 years later, driven by internal power struggles between its leaders. And in Sudan, conflicts continued to simmer in other regions like Darfur. The lesson from Sudan is that resolving one major conflict doesn't automatically bring peace to the entire nation. Peace has to be comprehensive, addressing all the grievances in all parts of the country. These examples aren't just failures, they are vital, painful lessons on the long road to peace. So, where do we go from here? What are the pathways to a more sustainable peace? First and foremost, the process must be inclusive. It can't just be a deal between two men in a fancy hotel. Women, youth, civil society leaders, and traditional elders all need to have a seat at the table. They often have the best understanding of the local dynamics and can help build a peace that has grassroots support. This leads to the second key point, local ownership. A peace process that is driven by outsiders, with little input from the actual people affected by the conflict, is doomed to fail. Communities need to feel that this is their peace, not something imposed upon them. This requires long-term commitment, not just from the international community, but from the national leaders themselves. Peace isn't a one-time event, it's a generational process. And that process has to be built on 3 pillars: economic development, justice, and reconciliation. As we discussed, you can't have peace without jobs and opportunity. Post-conflict reconstruction needs to focus on creating livelihoods and delivering a tangible peace dividend, so people can see and feel the benefits of laying down their arms. But development alone isn't enough. There has to be justice. People who have committed horrific crimes can't just be given amnesty and a government position. There needs to be accountability, whether through international courts, national trials, or traditional justice mechanisms. Without it, the cycle of impunity continues, and victims feel that their suffering has been ignored. Finally, there's reconciliation. This is perhaps the hardest part. It's about rebuilding the social fabric of a country torn apart by war. It's about former enemies learning to live together as neighbors again. This requires truth-telling, community dialogues, and a national effort to build a new, shared identity. It's slow, painful work, but it's absolutely essential for a peace that lasts. So, to wrap it all up, the reasons why peace agreements in Africa collapse are incredibly complex. It's a mix of internal power struggles, meddling from outside forces, fights over natural resources, weak governments, and deep-seated economic problems. The case studies from Angola, Rwanda, and Sudan show us how fragile these deals can be. But they also offer lessons. The path forward is not easy, but it is clear. We need peace processes that are inclusive and owned by the local people. We need a long-term commitment that combines economic development with justice and reconciliation. Lasting peace in Africa isn't an impossible dream. It requires a comprehensive approach that addresses the root causes of conflict, not just the symptoms. It's about building a society where everyone has a stake in peace, because they can see a future for themselves and their children that is better than a return to war. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this discussion interesting, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into important global issues. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.